The silence of the early morning in Bellevue, Washington, was broken by the muffled sound of footsteps on the wet grass. Patricia Miller, president of the Somerset Hills Neighborhood Beautification Committee, moved stealthily through the side garden of Robert Anderson's estate, her digital camera firmly gripped between her wrinkled fingers. At 58, dressed in a black sweatshirt ensemble that she considered suitable for clandestine operations, Patricia represented the embodiment of what locals called the Karen of HOAs. Robert's glass greenhouse, a majestic structure that took up a large part of the backyard, sparkled in the moonlight like a crystal palace. For 3 decades, this space had been the private sanctuary of Robert, a 65-year-old retired botanist who had dedicated his life to growing rare orchids. His internationally prized collection was a source of local pride, for everyone except Patricia. "This glass monstrosity is an affront to the aesthetic standards of our neighborhood," Patricia muttered to herself as she approached the structure, her growing obsession with the greenhouse having turned into a personal crusade in recent months. Since taking over the chairmanship of the committee 6 months ago, she had been trying to force Robert to donate part of his collection to the new community garden, his proudest personal project. Robert Anderson, a gentle widower who had found a purpose in orchids after his wife's death, had politely refused all of Patricia's advances. "My orchids are like daughters," he had explained during the association's last meeting. "Each one has been cultivated with love and patience. They are not mere decorations for a public garden." The answer only served to fuel Patricia's determination. In her obsession-distorted mind, she only needed photographic evidence of some violation of HOA rules to force Robert to give in. Her previous attempts to find irregularities had failed. The greenhouse was perfectly within building and zoning codes. As she approached the greenhouse door, Patricia noticed that it was unlocked. Careless of him, she thought, a mischievous smile appearing on her thin lips. The interior of the greenhouse was a labyrinth of beauty, rows and rows of exotic orchids, their soft colors only partially visible in the dim light. Patricia turned on the flashlight on her cell phone, aiming the beam of light at the nearest plants. A Thai Vanda corulea, its deep blue petals shimmering under the artificial light, seemed to look at her with disapproval. Next to it, a rare Paphiopedilum rothschildianum, known as the Borneo Venus slipper, displayed its unique shape. As she moved between the rows of plants, Patricia didn't notice the automatic irrigation system installed in the ground. Her foot got tangled in one of the hoses and, before she could balance herself, she fell forward, knocking over an entire shelf of very rare Thai orchids. The sound of breaking pots echoed through the greenhouse like a scream of agony. Patricia stood paralyzed, horrified at the destruction she had caused. Plants that Robert had taken years to grow lay destroyed on the floor, their roots exposed and petals scattered like tragic confetti. The lights in the main house came on, and Patricia heard Robert's voice. "Who's there?" Panicked, she tried to get up, but slipped again, this time twisting her ankle. The sharp pain made her let out an involuntary groan. Robert found Patricia sitting on the floor of the greenhouse, surrounded by the destruction of her precious collection. Her normally kind face was transformed by pain and anger. "My God, Patricia, why?" In the days that followed, news of the incident spread quickly through the Somerset Hills community. To everyone's surprise, Patricia, instead of apologizing, decided to sue Robert for negligence. Her lawyer, Maxwell Bennett, known for taking on controversial cases, argued that the greenhouse was a dangerous trap and a threat to public safety. "My client was merely fulfilling her duties as chair of the committee," Bennett said in an interview with the local newspaper. "Mr. Anderson maintains a dangerous structure on his property without proper lighting or safety signs." The community was divided. While some older residents supported Robert, others, especially new residents attracted by the promise of a perfectly controlled neighborhood, aligned themselves with Patricia. The ensuing legal battle promised to expose the growing tensions between the individual rights of homeowners and the increasing power of neighborhood associations. Robert, sitting in his kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea, looked out of the window at his beloved greenhouse, now partly empty. The destroyed orchids, valued at over $25,000, represented years of dedication and love. But more than the monetary value, it was the violation of his personal sanctuary that hurt him deeply. "Some people just can't bear to see others happy with their own choices," commented his neighbor and friend, Dorothy Chen, a 70-year-old woman who often admired his orchids. "But don't worry, Robert, the truth always prevails." Meanwhile, Patricia, recovering at home with her ankle bandaged, was planning her next move. For her, this had become more than just a question of neighborhood aesthetics. It was a battle for control and power. In her mind, defeat was not an option, even if it meant destroying the peace and harmony that once characterized Somerset Hills. The Orchid War was just beginning, and no one in the Somerset Hills would be immune to its consequences. News of the incident in Robert's greenhouse spread through the Somerset Hills like pollen on the wind. Over breakfast at the Somerset Hills diner, the locals heatedly debated the case, while Dorothy Chen observed everything from her usual table, discreetly jotting down the reactions in her small notebook, a habit she had kept up since her days as a sociology teacher. "You won't believe it," whispered Mabel Winston, the neighborhood's official gossip, leaning over the counter. Patricia hired Maxwell Bennett. Yes, that Maxwell Bennett from the Lincoln Square Mall case. Maxwell Bennett had built his reputation defending seemingly indefensible cases, turning trespassers into victims and landlords into villains. His office, located in downtown Bellevue, was known for its aggressive tactics and for manipulating public opinion through the local media. Robert, oblivious to the morning gossip, was in his damaged greenhouse, meticulously cataloging each loss. His hands trembled slightly as he photographed the remains of his precious orchids. The Thai Vanda coerulea, which had taken 15 years to reach maturity, was completely destroyed. Next to him, Dr. Marcus Wong, a specialist in rare orchids from the Seattle Botanical Garden, was taking detailed notes. "This is a crime, Robert," said Dr. Wong, adjusting his glasses as he examined a mutilated Paphiopedilum rothschildianum. "These species are practically irreplaceable. The documentation we're doing will be crucial to the criminal process." On the other side of town, Patricia was meeting with Maxwell Bennett in his 20th floor office overlooking Lake Washington. The lawyer, known for his impeccable suit and calculated smile, listened intently as she constructed her narrative. "Mr. Bennett, that greenhouse is a flagrant violation of safety codes," Patricia insisted, her bandaged ankle strategically positioned on a pillow. "As chair of the committee, it was my duty to investigate the irregularities." Bennett smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Miller, let's turn your into a compelling narrative. Audiences love a story about a community leader concerned about the safety of her neighbors." Meanwhile, in the cafe of the Somerset Community Center, a group of younger residents, led by Ashley Martinez, a 32-year-old environmental lawyer, was organizing a committee to support Robert. "We can't allow the HOA to continue abusing its power," Ashley declared, handing out flyers with the headline, "Save Somerset Orchids." Tension in the neighborhood grew by the day. Robert began to receive anonymous letters of support in his mailbox, while Patricia faced disapproving looks in the local supermarket. The community, once united, was now clearly divided between two factions. Dorothy Chen, watching events unfold, decided to take action. As a former university professor and respected community mediator, she organized an informal meeting at her home, inviting both Robert and Patricia supporters. "Our community is tearing itself apart," Dorothy told those present, pouring her famous jasmine tea. "We need to find a path to reconciliation." But the meeting quickly turned into a verbal battleground. Richard Cooper, a retired realtor, defended Patricia. "Rules exist for a reason. If we allow exceptions, where will it stop?" "Exceptions?" retorted Maria Hernandez, a local landscaper. "Robert has been growing these orchids for longer than most of you have lived here. His greenhouse is part of our neighborhood's identity." While the community squabbled, Maxwell Bennett prepared his legal strategy. His assistant discovered that Robert had made minor modifications to the greenhouse over the years without proper documentation. Bennett planned to use this information to push for a substantial settlement. Robert, for his part, hired Jennifer Park, a lawyer specializing in real estate law, recommended by Dr. Wong. "We're not just going to defend ourselves, Mr. Anderson," Jennifer assured him. "We're going to sue Patricia for trespass and willful destruction." The local media began to take an interest in the case. The Bellevue Reporter published a cover story entitled, "Flower Wars: When Does the Power of the HOA Go Too Far?" The story quickly went viral, attracting the attention of property rights activists across the country. Patricia, realizing that public opinion was turning against her, stepped up her campaign. She began circulating a petition claiming that the greenhouse diminished the value of neighboring properties and posed a safety risk due to the glass and electrical systems. Robert found unexpected solace in his daily routine of caring for the surviving orchids. Each morning, he entered the damaged greenhouse and talked to his plants, as he always had. "You are more than flowers," he murmured. "You are my companions, my confidants." One afternoon, while Robert was working in the greenhouse, Dorothy showed up with a surprise, a seedling of Vanda coerulea, the same species that had been destroyed. "My niece works at the Bangkok Botanical Gardens," she explained. "It's not exactly the same, but maybe it's a fresh start." Robert held the small vase with trembling hands, silent tears streaming down his wrinkled face. That simple gesture of kindness rekindled his hope in humanity, even in the midst of the legal battle that lay ahead. The date for the first hearing was set for 2 weeks later in King County District Court. Meanwhile, Somerset Hills remained divided, its residents choosing sides in a war that had begun with an obsession with rare flowers and turned into a clash over the limits of power and the meaning of community. The front page of the Seattle Times left Patricia Miller stunned during her morning coffee. "Tyranny of HOAs, the case of the destroyed orchids," ran the headline, accompanied by a photo of Robert Anderson in his damaged greenhouse, surrounded by his precious surviving orchids. The article, written by renowned investigative journalist Rebecca Chen, coincidentally Dorothy's daughter, exposed disturbing details about Patricia's record as chair of the committee. "We uncovered a disturbing pattern of intimidation and harassment against homeowners in Somerset Hills." The article quoted her as saying, revealing that Patricia had filed similar lawsuits against 3 other residents in the past 6 months. Maxwell Bennett, her attorney, immediately began receiving calls from other law firms offering pro bono representation for Robert. In King County District Court, Judge Miranda Holbrook examined the preliminary documents with a stern expression. "Mr. Bennett," she said, adjusting her gold-framed glasses, "your petition alleges negligence, but the photographic evidence clearly shows an unauthorized nighttime trespass. I would like to hear your explanation." Meanwhile, in the Somerset Hills, a surprising discovery was stirring up the waters even more. Ashley Martinez, rummaging through the town's public archives, found something intriguing. "Dorothy, you need to see this," she said, spreading out documents on the Chen's kitchen table. Robert's greenhouse was registered as a local heritage site in 1995. Patricia can't legally touch it. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood via the Nextdoor app. Residents began posting old photos of weddings and community events held in Robert's greenhouse over the decades. One particularly moving image showed Susan, Robert's late wife, smiling among the orchids during a charity tea in 1992. Robert, oblivious to the digital commotion, received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Marcus Wong returned with a delegation of botanists from the Seattle Botanical Garden. "Robert," he announced, "we want to declare your greenhouse a species preservation site. Some of your orchids are the last known specimens outside Southeast Asia." Patricia watched all this with growing despair. Her lawsuit was crumbling, and her reputation, built up over years of micromanaging her neighbors' lives, was in tatters. Maxwell Bennett began to suggest an out-of-court settlement, but she refused to budge. "I don't understand," Patricia confided to her daughter Karen, yes, ironically named, over a tense lunch. All I wanted was a perfect neighborhood. Why can't people just follow the rules? Karen, a 35-year-old therapist who had long tried to understand her mother's controlling behavior, replied softly, Mom, maybe the perfection you seek is destroying the very thing that makes our community special. The real turning point came when Dorothy Chen organized a photo exhibition at the community center, documenting 30 years of Robert's greenhouse history. The images showed generations of neighborhood children learning about botany, couples celebrating anniversaries, and countless moments of shared joy. You see, Dorothy explained to the visitors, this isn't just a greenhouse. It's the living heart of the Somerset Hills. Each orchid tells a story of our community. The impact was immediate and profound. Former supporters of Patricia began to change sides, especially when they discovered that she had rejected several reasonable settlement offers from Robert, who only asked for compensation for the damage to the plants and a formal apology. Jennifer Park, Robert's lawyer, came up with a surprising counter-proposal. Robert would offer monthly gardening classes in the greenhouse, sharing his knowledge with the community in exchange for the withdrawal of the lawsuit and Patricia's resignation as chair of the committee. The proposal provoked a wave of public support. Even Richard Cooper, the realtor who had initially defended Patricia, changed his position. You know, he admitted during an HOA meeting, I was wrong. Robert's greenhouse doesn't decrease the value of our properties. It increases it. Who wouldn't want to live in a neighborhood with a botanical treasure? Patricia, isolated and increasingly aware of her untenable position, finally had her moment of clarity during a solitary evening visit to the community garden she so wanted to improve. Sitting on a bench, looking at the ordinary flowers that now seemed so dull compared to Robert's orchids, she began to cry. Dorothy, passing by on her usual evening stroll, found Patricia and, surprisingly, sat down next to her. You know, Dorothy began softly, sometimes what we think is control is just fear of losing something we never really had. The moment of vulnerability shared between the two women would mark the beginning of a transformation, not just for Patricia, but for the whole of the Somerset Hills. The Orchid War was about to reveal its most valuable lesson, that the true beauty of a community lies not in its rules, but in the bonds that unite its members. Meanwhile, in the partially restored greenhouse, a small seedling of Vanda coerulea was beginning to show its first signs of flowering, a silent symbol that even after destruction, there is always hope for renewal. King County District Court was buzzing with activity on the morning of the preliminary hearing. Jennifer Park, Robert's lawyer, watched as a crowd of Somerset Hills residents filled the courtroom benches. Dorothy Chen had organized a silent show of support. Each person carried a single orchid. Maxwell Bennett entered the room with his usual confidence, but his smile faltered when he saw Patricia limping towards him, clutching a thick folder. We need to talk, she whispered, her face tense. I found something in my files that changes everything. Before Bennett could reply, Judge Holbrook entered the room. Silence descended on the assembly like a heavy curtain. Robert, sitting in the front row next to Dr. Wong, nervously squeezed a handkerchief between his fingers. Before we begin, announced the judge, I'd like to address a few procedural irregularities. She held up a set of documents. I received disturbing evidence this morning about Ms. Miller's conduct in previous cases involving the HOA. Patricia paled. The documents she wanted to show Bennett were about exactly that. During her obsessive nightly organizing, she had found forgotten records of an HOA audit from 1992, the year Robert and Susan Anderson had applied for permission to expand the greenhouse. Your Honor, Patricia suddenly stood up, surprising even her own attorney. I request permission to make a statement. Judge Holbrook arched an eyebrow. Proceed, Ms. Miller. 31 years ago, Patricia began, her voice trembling, I was secretary of the committee when Robert and Susan Anderson applied to expand the greenhouse. I voted against it. She paused, tears beginning to form. Susan was my best friend in college. We had dreamed of opening a nursery together, but I gave it up to pursue a corporate career. When she married Robert and realized our dream without me, a murmur went through the room. Dorothy Chen closed her eyes, remembering now the old graduation photographs she had seen at Susan's house. Patricia was there, smiling, an arm around her friend's shoulders. Envy consumed me, Patricia continued. When Susan died, I should have supported Robert, but instead, I spent years looking for ways to control, to diminish what they had built together. She turned to Robert. That night in the greenhouse, I wasn't looking for rape. I was looking for a piece of her, something that could reconnect me with the person I used to be. Robert stood up slowly, his eyes meeting Patricia's. Susan always said you had the best eye for orchids in college, he said softly. She kept all the letters you exchanged the first year after graduation before I stopped answering, Patricia added, sobbing. Please withdraw your objection, Robert. I'll resign from the committee, pay for the damages, do whatever it takes. Maxwell Bennett stood up, ready to protest, but Patricia silenced him with a gesture. Judge Holbrook watched the scene with interest, her expression softening. Jennifer Park conferred briefly with Robert before pronouncing, Your Honor, my client is willing to drop the charges under certain conditions. The next 2 hours were spent negotiating the terms of the agreement. In the end, it was agreed that Patricia would resign as president, pay for the damage to the orchids, and, most significantly, work with Robert to establish an educational program in the greenhouse. When the session ended, Dorothy Chen approached Patricia. You know, she said gently, Susan always believed you would come back. She kept a space in the greenhouse especially for you, with the species you dreamed of growing together. In the courthouse parking lot, Ashley Martinez was coordinating a group of young residents who had volunteered to help restore the greenhouse. We thought we'd turn it into a community project, she explained to Robert, preserving the legacy and creating something new at the same time. Richard Cooper, surprising everyone, announced that his real estate company would sponsor the restoration. It's an investment in the community, he declared, and a way to make up for having supported restrictive HOA policies for so long. As people dispersed, Robert found Patricia alone on the bench outside the courthouse. Quietly, he held out a small pot containing an orchid seedling. Susan propagated this cattleya before. Well, she always said it was for you. Patricia took the pot with trembling hands, recognizing the rare species that she and Susan had discovered in an old catalog during their evenings of study. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Maybe not, Robert replied softly. But Susan believed you did. And after today, I do too. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the parking lot as the last cars left. Dorothy Chen, watching from afar, smiled as she saw Robert and Patricia walking together towards the nearest cafe, the small orchid carefully protected between them. The orchid war was over, but its true legacy was just beginning to flourish in the Somerset Hills. The transformation of Robert Anderson's greenhouse became the event of the summer in the Somerset Hills. On a sunny Saturday morning, dozens of residents gathered for what Ashley Martinez dubbed the Great Revival. Volunteers of all ages, equipped with gardening tools and determined smiles, worked in harmony to restore the glass sanctuary. Watch out for that phalaenopsis, shouted Dr. Wong, rushing to save a rare orchid from the well-meaning but inexperienced hands of Richard Cooper. The real estate agent, now turned gardening enthusiast, had become one of Robert's most dedicated apprentices. Patricia Miller, wearing a gardening apron with the name Susan embroidered on it, a relic found in an old box, worked quietly in a corner of the greenhouse. Her hands, once busy drafting violation notices, were now delicately cleaning leaves and removing dead flowers, recovering skills long forgotten. Susan always said you had magic orchid hands, Robert commented, approaching with a cup of tea. Patricia smiled sadly, looking at the cattleya he had given her, now blooming in shades of deep lavender. She was wrong about a lot of things, Patricia replied softly. but mostly about me. I was the wrong person back then, Robert. I let jealousy and regret poison everything. Dorothy Chen, who was organizing a photographic archive of the restoration process, captured the moment of silent reconciliation between the two. "For the memorial," she explained, showing the photo on her digital camera. In the image, sunlight was streaming through the glass of the greenhouse, creating a soft halo around the two figures. The restoration project had turned into something bigger than anyone could have imagined. Ashley Martinez coordinated the creation of an educational program where local school students came to learn about botany and conservation. Jennifer Park, Robert's lawyer, helped establish a non-profit foundation to maintain the new Somerset Hills Botanical Education Center. "Look at that," murmured Richard Cooper to Dorothy, watching a group of fascinated children as Robert explained the process of pollination. Who knew that a war over orchids would end up bringing the community together so much? The new HOA board, led by Ashley, has established more flexible, community-focused guidelines. The community garden, once the subject of dispute, now integrated seamlessly with Robert's greenhouse, creating a green corridor that significantly increased property values, much to Richard's satisfaction. One afternoon, while Patricia was organizing old photographs for an exhibition on the history of the greenhouse, she came across a never-sent letter from Susan, dated a few weeks before her death. With trembling hands, she read her old friend's words. "Dear Pat, I have always guarded your space here, hoping that one day you would find your way back to what you really love. Orchids have a special way of teaching us about patience and forgiveness. They can sleep for years, but it's never too late for them to bloom." Tears stained the yellowed paper. Patricia felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was Dorothy. "You know," said the wise observer, "Susan was right. It's never too late." The following week, Somerset Hills celebrated the official opening of the renovated Botanical Center. Robert, in a rare moment of public speaking, surprised everyone by announcing that a new wing of the greenhouse would be dedicated to Susan's memory and named the Garden of Reconciliation. "This space," he said, his voice breaking, "will be dedicated to the species that Susan and Patricia dreamed of growing together. Because some dreams, even if they've been dormant for decades, deserve a chance to blossom." Patricia, who hadn't expected the gesture, found herself surrounded by comforting arms as the tears began to fall. The community she had once tried to control with an iron fist now embraced her in her moment of vulnerability. Dr. Wong, observing the scene, commented to Dorothy, "You know, in botany, we call this symbiosis, when different organisms learn to grow together, strengthening each other." The sun was beginning to set over the Somerset Hills, casting golden shadows across the glass panels of the greenhouse. Robert and Patricia walked among the rows of orchids, discussing plans for new species and educational programs. The Thai Vanda coerulea, recovered from the disaster, was displaying its first blue flowers, a symbol of renewal. On the mural at the entrance, a new sign shone in the twilight. "Welcome to the Garden of the Second Chance, where every flower has a story to tell and every person has the opportunity to start again." The orchid war was over, but its legacy would continue to flourish for generations. In the Somerset Hills, people have learned that sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air, and that even in the most unlikely situations, beauty and healing can emerge from the ashes of conflict. As the automatic greenhouse lights came on softly, illuminating the flowers like earthly stars, Dorothy Chen made one last note in her notebook. "In a garden of second chances, even the sharpest thorns can turn into petals of hope."